Just want to remind everybody that we have one of the premier scientists in the world coming to our little state of Connecticut. Cameron Jack will be here on the 21st. This is an Ag Station event. So if you are planning on maybe skipping it and watching it on Zoom, you'll be disappointed because we're not even going to record it. So he'll be here in person, and he has extraordinary speaking skills, meaning that he is a teacher by profession. So he knows how to explain things, and he'll be a very good person for you to ask questions to. He has lots of knowledge on the application of oxalic acid. He did one of the latest tests that indicated that the label isn't sufficiently, the dosage on the label isn't sufficient for actual varroa control. I traveled with him in Thailand. I've been with him in Santiago, Chile. And so he's also a friend of mine, and I can vouch for his extraordinary scientific prowess, but in another approachable way. So he's the kind of a speaker that I think will be is valuable for us to have. So that is at the Ag Station. So go ahead and register for that event if you want to come. And also, our B School is out, so please spread the word that you can also register for B School. And we have two incredible speakers left. We have Jeff Pettis, who is currently, he's our November speaker, and he's the current president of IPA Mundi. Now that ought to be a really interesting perspective on world beekeeping. So he's going to be in November, and then of course the MacArthur Genius Grant award-winning scientist Marla Spivak is going to be with us in December. She is the pioneer researcher on things like propolis and hygienic behavior. She got so good at her job, she had to stop doing it. So we'll get the latest from her. She's a very, very down-to-earth speaker, and you're going to love her. If you've never heard Marla Spivak talk, this is your opportunity to do that. You know, the bee yard is basically closed for the season. We probably will have another event. We're going to be there on the 17th during the day just to clean up things in the yard and put on sleeves. If anybody wants to come, that's a morning. That's at 10 a.m. in the morning on the 17th. You can come and hang around, bring coffee, count bees. You know, you don't have to work, but I wanted to thank the tireless staff we had this year, including Paul, Armando, Jamie was there a lot, Walter and Anatoly, our up and coming apprentice yard person, and so is Jamie, by the way. Jamie, by the way, is a wonderful photographer, and she's been providing us with some really substantive photographs. So I'll put some of those together on a blog at some point and get you guys to see the kind of work Jamie's doing for us there. Right. So, there are other people who have showed up in the bee yard for almost every session, and I want to thank them also because they made it possible by asking questions and being there for support and every other thing, helping out in many, many ways, putting smoker fuel in, all the things that are required to actually execute a successful bee yard event. There's a lot of silent partners in there that have been helping out, answering questions, and doing all kinds of wonderful things, taking video for us and so forth. All right. So right now, your bees are probably robbing everything that they can possibly get their hands on. I know mine are. You know, we are in my area here in Cheshire, based on my observation of what kind of behavior I sparked up in the yard, and by just taking some empty supers off of some stickies I had cleaned, just taking them off the hives, and I put them in the shed, and the door crept open on me, and I had 1,000 bees in there before I knew it. So bees are looking for things to nectar to lap up. They don't have anything out there, as far as I know. Maybe some white wood aster is out, but it's not enough to sustain any kind of a flow for bees at this point. So robbing is the order of the day. So be very careful in your yard that you don't, even if you have a couple of colonies, spilling syrup, doing all kinds of things like that. Or if you're near a beekeeper that has lots of colonies and he's open feeding or doing something like that, you got to expect this time of year that you can get some horrible behavior. Robbing behavior is I think horrible. It's aggressive. I got stung inside the shed by a bee that's going a little nuts. All right, so with that, has anybody seen anything? What contributions can you make for something coming into your colony at this point? I'm sure some of you are seeing pollen still come in from some source. But so anybody have anything that they can offer in terms of what plants they see in bloom that bees are taking advantage of?
Hey, Bill, in Farmington, still seeing some, there's still quite a bit of goldenrod still out this
Oh,
area.
your goldenrod's up still.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, trust me, it's no longer the vibrant yellow that it used to be like 2 weeks ago, but there still is a good amount of yellow in the fields and alongside the roads out this way. So
Yeah, see, that's a difference in that's the difference in locations.
Hmm.
You for whatever it is, you guys are seeing different things.
I'm seeing is like you said, asters and a stray goldenrod here and there. That's about it.
Yeah, and that one, a little stray goldenrod wouldn't be enough. So at this point,
Occasional daisy type of flower.
yeah. All right, so what's critical?
I've seen sorry.
Go, Jamie.
I saw a little bit of knotweed left, and just the asters, but also pretty much the only thing they have to eat are sunflowers that I planted. So they're on that. And then I also have Mexican sunflowers, Tithonia, and they don't go to that, even though it's covered in bumblebees and it's right adjacent. I was surprised because the monarchs really like the Tithonia, but just ignore it.
Huh.
I have Mexican sunflowers. It's not the same plant, and I have regular flowers, and they like the regular sunflowers, but they don't like the Mexican sunflowers, even though everything else likes the Mexican sunflowers.
That's interesting. Yeah. All right. So that's about it for. I think our foraging season is pretty much in my area. I would say it's over, and now I'm faced with the dilemma that I hope you guys are also thinking about at this point: is where do you go from here with your stores and your preparation for winter? Because actually, if you have insulated hardware like an insulated top, you can still use a top feeder at this point, and you can still get a couple gallons of syrup into your bees before it gets cold enough where they can't come up to that feeder. And you can also use a division board feeder, which goes inside of you have to take a frame or two out of your colony and feed from an inside the colony, which commercial beekeepers will leave a single feeder like that inside the colony all year, but we usually don't do that as backyard beekeepers. And in both cases, the top feeders, if you buy a commercial version of a top feeder, so top feeders usually go right over the top of, say, the deep box. And I think they make them in both 8-frame versions and 10-frame versions. And you can, as long as your colony is level, that's a great feeder, because it will you can put almost 2 gallons of syrup. So that's a great top feeder. And as long as as I mentioned, as long as you have an insulated top over that feeder, you can extend the life of its efficacy for a week or two. And you can probably feed all the way to the end of October with that. If you wanted to get some good 2-to-1 syrup into your colony at this point, that's a great feeder as long as you have an insulated top. Now, it might even work. I know it will work in 50-degree days, even with a regular telescoping cover. All right, so if you're going to use one of these top feeders, you cannot have a top entrance open or a way for bees to get in under your telescoping cover and into this feeder. That means, that all of your hardware has to be in decent enough shape so that if you put your telescoping cover on, it seals the top rim of the black rim of that top feeder. So no bees can get in. Otherwise, you will have thousands of bees dead in the top of that colony. They'll come from our net feeder. They'll come from all over. You'll find yellow jackets in there. You'll find, thousands of bees. It turns into a total disaster. If there's a way for bees to get into that feeder from the outside, the only way that feeder works is from the inside. Bees come up through the center where you see that screen portion, and they feed on the syrup bath that's on either side, either tray. And that's where I said before, I mentioned that being level is important for your colony. And if it's not level, you have to judge that when you're pouring syrup into it. And if it's not level from the front to the back, it won't matter much. But if it's not level from left to the right, you will strand syrup in one side of it. So you have to actually figure out how you fill it. And you fill it from the side that will always feed syrup back down against that wire. Hopefully that makes sense to people. All right, so we covered that has to be bee tight, and that you have to pay attention to how you fill it. And level is the best way to go with that, because then it will totally empty and you won't have to come back and do a lot of maintenance on it. But if it's not level, you fill the side that is I don't know how you would say it, downhill or uphill or something from the surface. So I think you know what I'm talking about. And then there's a division board feeder. Maybe you can get one of them up here, or there's one down below. All right, there's one, that pro feeder down there. That one there, yeah. So now this is a 2.5 inch wide. They come in different, whenever you see, by the way, whenever you see 9 1/8 before a device, that means it's a deep. All right, the other dimensions are different for mediums and shallows. So 9 1/8 inch pro feeder, you can get 10% off.
Not endorsing Man Lake.
Holds 1.5 gallons, and it has a little cap. It has wooden caps, elastic bands, and then these little plastic cones. You can see 2 holes in the top. That's actually a plastic cone that bees can walk down so that they don't drown in it. If you put it together this way and put it in your colony, you're not, yep, right there. That's a cone that they can walk down and feed. It's got little holes in it. If you put it together this way, the way it's supposed to be put together, it works fine. Bees don't drown in this feeder at all. If you decide that it's too much work for you to put that wooden top in and elastic bands and those little cones, and you just pour syrup in that, then you're going to find that bees drowned in it fairly easily. But you can avoid that if you don't have that top. You can avoid that by putting pine needles in it. If you put stuffed pine needles in it up to the brim, then you won't lose one bee in it. All right. So, and by the way, that goes for any kind of feeder where bees have to crawl down into it. If you put pine needles in it, they will not drown. They actually use those little pine needles to stand on, and they will lap up all of the syrup in that feeder, and they just continue by cleaning all the pine needles off. And when they're done, it's absolutely clean. You can use those pine needles in your smoker. I think I showed folks that at the bee yard at one time. Other kind of feeders, pail feeders. Let's take a look at one of those here. Oh yeah, that's a different kind of feeder. Yeah, that one there.
Teresa has a
There's the pale feeders. All right, so there's a bee yard that has too many bees in it and in a thoughtless configuration. So, but there's pails on the top of them. Those are just inverted over covers that have a hole in it. And but you can do that inside your colony with a pail. You can buy pails that hold different amounts of syrup. You can buy them commercially, or you can find your own and poke holes in the top. It has to be a real snap fit top over this pail. And the center of it has to have a hole in it with number 8 hardware cloth or some kind of screening in it that will allow the suction to occur. And then that entire pail can be inverted over the top of the ported bee escape hole in your inner cover. And there it is right there. That's a good picture of it right there. There it is. Yeah. And that's and that can be used like the way we would use that is we would put it over the top of the ported bee escape hole once it's filled with syrup. And then we put another box around it to protect it, and then put a telescoping lid on that box so that the pail turned upside down over that hole, over the ported bee escape hole in your inner cover, is not exposed to any outside traffic. Again, it has to be contained in a bee tight space. Otherwise, you'll just have a ton of bees in there looking to rob it, especially this time of year. Right now,
Hey, Bill,
yep.
any of those pail feeders, you have to check because a lot of them don't fit in mediums
Okay, so you would have to put it deep around it.
or 2 mediums.
Or 2 mediums. So as Michael says, you have to consider the height. And the 1 gallon feeder is probably pretty high and may not get into there. Oh no, it's 7 1/4. So that dimensions are made to fit inside of a medium. All right.
Mediums are 6 5/8.
Yeah, 6 5/8. But there's you can let's see. No, that's right. But there are 7 1/4 mediums, but the people don't have those. Yeah, that one will require deep over the top of it. That's right, 6 5/8. That's exactly right. Thank you, Michael. Or you can use the standard 1 gallon pickle jar, and that's real old school. Oh, there's other kinds of feeders too. You just have to look them up and see what you want. There's the ultimate feeder. There's all kinds of ways to feed bees. Those blue plastic things, I don't think they keep enough. They hold enough syrup this time of year to get a good dose into your colony. But you can use those also. And you can use the 1 gallon pickle jar if you can still find them. I had a collection of them. I gave them up once I built, 30 or 40 top feeders for myself. But you can use a pickle jar the same way you would use a pail. And, you poke holes in it with a little, you poke 5 or 6 or 10 holes in it with a little finish nail, really small, just the tip of the finish nail. And you invert that pickle jar over the top of the same ported bee escape hole in the inner cover. And you can feed them that way. All right, so there's lots of different ways to feed them. And so there's no excuse that you can't afford a feeder, because you can make one out of a pickle jar or other small jars, as long as you put a little wedge under them so bees can get under the bottom of them and feed. Now you can use all kinds of jars, mason jars, all different jars, and make all kinds of different feeders that will work. You can even think of a new way if you want to. All right, so the question is, though, what to feed them? All right, so now that's a different story, right? What to feed them is, at this point, is a heavier syrup. And the reason for that is it requires less work for them to store that somewhere or use it immediately than it does light syrup. Light syrup, it's usually, we refer to light syrup, which is an equal amount by weight of sugar to water, right? That's called 1 to 1. Now, I don't care how you measure that. You just have to know how much your water weighs. If you have a 5-pound bag of sugar, then you have to have 5 pounds of water and 5 pounds of sugar. That's 1 to 1 if you were making that. Now, if you want to make 2 to 1, you can use a 10-pound bag of sugar and the same amount of water, 5 pounds, right? That's a little bit harder to dissolve because it's a richer, it's got more solids in it, more sugar. And that's what we should actually be feeding at this point to your colonies is 2 to 1, heavy syrup, they refer to it as. So it would be 5 pounds of water and 10 pounds of sugar. Now, how do you figure that out? Well, you know, if somebody wants to get the wiki up on water, I think it weighs a little bit over 8 pounds per gallon. Right. So if you used a gallon of water, it'd be too much for too much water for 2 to 1. So you got to spill a little bit out. And the reason I'm telling you can spill a little bit out is because this is not really an exact science. It's not like it has to be exactly 2 to 1 or it'll kill your bees. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to be a heavier syrup. So you take a gallon of water or weigh something that's exactly 5 pounds and mark a bucket, a plastic bucket, and from then on you'll have it. Whatever you do, just try to get that ratio between 2 parts of sugar and 1 part of water. Now, what I used to do is heat that to get it to go liquid, because even if you don't heat it, you don't use hot water from your tap when you're actually making this mixture together, you'll get a lot of grains that'll lay on the bottom of whatever it is that you're making syrup in and stirring it. You got to stir it repeatedly, like every 10 minutes or 15 minutes until you see that it's starting to clarify and all of the sugar is sort of suspended in the water. All right, any questions on that? Did I miss any feeders or the feeders you want to talk about? Or
I just want to say one thing.
yeah,
And for the accuracy that we're worried about, a pint's a pound. So if you've got 5 pounds of sugar, double strength sugar, then you want 2.5 pints of water.
yeah, and you can measure that with a cup, right? I mean, a measuring cup.
Okay.
Right. So the saying is a pint is a pound the world around. I mean, so anytime you have a pint, you have a pound of water in it, if you put water in it. Yeah, absolutely. So not that.
Bill,
Yeah.
it's Teresa. I just wanted to say I use the Pro feeder in my hives, and it's a bit of a process when you go to refill it, because I find I have it, the cones are always full of bees.
Yeah.
So, it takes, and then they propolize around the cones. So prying the cones out to empty the cones of bees before filling takes a little muscle. So I'm thinking about getting those top feeders you're talking about, because I think that might be a lot easier to refill.
Oh, your top feeders are painless to refill.
Yeah.
Because you're never involved in bees.
Right.
Right. You don't even have to light. You don't have to light a smoker. You just go around and fill it up.
Right. And I know I need to use the smoker. I need to jack it up and use a smoker to fill the Pro feeders.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go slow, the bees will walk out of the way. All right. So what I've done is I got this little thing from Walmart or something that has it has a spout on it. Sometimes use it for beverages. It puts out a very small stream and it takes more time and it's a little bit harder to do. But if you use that, you can get the bees to walk out of that cone before you drown a bunch of them. And you really don't want to drown them in syrup because they'll rot in there. They'll actually stay pretty preserved in the syrup, but eventually it gets really funky and you don't really want to do that. So you cannot use that at all, the wood and the cones, and you can put pine needles in it. Then you don't have any problem. You won't drown bees. You can put it in almost as fast as you want. And you just, first you stuff it full with pine needles, believe it or not. And then you pour your syrup in. So dry, put the pine needles in, then pour your syrup in. And you'll be surprised how much syrup that will take even with a full boat of pine needles in it. Good time of year to get pine needles right now. You can find them all over the place. And so you can try that.
And you don't need to change out the pine needles once you've filled
No, you
them?
don't need, no, they don't need to be changed out. They don't rot. They don't do anything. They don't get mold on them because the bees clean them.
Mhm.
Yeah, they clean them up.
Okay. I
So
may
you
try
can
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a process to fill those feeders, so.
Yeah, it is a process to fill the feeders. Yeah, it is, absolutely. Scott's got his hand up.
Yes, the pine needles, we actually learned that from your last BR class. We have frame feeders and we took the wood off and the stuff and put pine needles in, and it's been working perfectly.
Well, that's good.
The question I have is, we switched over to 2-to-1 a couple weeks ago. And I mix with a 25-pound bag.
Okay,
Sometimes I don't use it all. I have 3 hives going now. I started with 2 and it's our first year. We started with
Yeah.
2, we end up 3, we had to split. So my problem is I take the extra that I don't use, I put it in the garage and the sugar
Yeah.
falls to the bottom.
all
And
top to the bottom, yeah.
yeah, is there any process or anything like that to
Yeah,
get it back mixed or?
you can get more of that to stay suspended if you heat it again. If you
Okay.
can heat it to 1,000,000 degrees, but so I used to use a turkey fryer and a big pot that I have, and that's the way I used to make a big batch of it. I thought you were going to tell me it gets mold on the top.
No, it's that's the only problem I've had is, I
Yeah.
mix it on the stove and one of my wife's old canning pots that she has.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's big enough. Yeah.
Yep, and put it in there and actually take my drill with a paint mixer on it, and so I mix it real good. It's just if it sits in the garage for a few days, a week, the sugar falls to the bottom again.
Yeah, not all of it though. I mean, there's a lot in the syrup.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's still heavy syrup. So that's what I'm suggesting, that we don't be too concerned about that happening, but just try to stir it a little bit again and see what you can get up in suspension and pour it back in the feeder.
All right, thank you.
It ends up coming out of, it ends up being, it crystallizes a little bit on the bottom of the feeder also. So there's not much you can
Okay.
do about that either.
Thank you.
All right. So we have the formula for 2-to-1 this time of year. And again, any other observations about feeding? Well, by the way, if you get a pail or a jar feeder, changes in the atmospheric pressure will play little tricks on them jars. And if you don't put your tops on real tight, or if they don't have a good plastic seal on them, they can leak out. So you have to, if you're going to use an inverted pail or inverted jar of any kind, make certain they are not leaking. Because I was adamant that I was going to use jars, old school, for a long, long time. And I'd always get jars that would leak. And they will leak all of, all of the syrup out. And it goes down the comb and out the front of the colony, or down through the screen bottom board. So so make sure that you're not leaking. You got to turn them upside down and observe them for a minute. And then when you're doing that in a yard this time of year, this is the downside of inverting syrup in pails or jars. You'd want to naturally do that over the grass or something. If you do that in a yard that's subject to wanting to rob, you're going to end up stimulating robbing. So I suggest that when you flip anything over this time of year, other times of year, not so important. This time of year, make sure you flip it over inside whatever it is you're going to cover that pail or jar with, like a big deep or something. And you do that all inside there. And then what runs out will run out on the inner cover, and it'll give the bees an opportunity to lap it up, and it won't mess up the yard. You don't want to start spilling syrup around the yard this time of year. Now, robber bees are Michael's favorite thing to hate. Isn't that true, Michael?
Oh yeah, I've been writing articles about robber bees for 10, 12 years, I guess.
Yeah. And he has tendency to blame everything on robber bees, but and I like that idea because you should start from that point thinking that you're getting robbed. So robbing behavior itself is pretty identifiable. And if I miss some characteristics of it, Michael, you fill in, but I have observed that robber bees will try to get into any entrance that they possibly could get into in the colony. So if bees are trying to rob your colony, you will see them in places where the natural foraging behaviors and avenues of back and forth are not being observed. They're searching around underneath the telescoping cover to see if they can get in. They're going around the seams of the colony to see if they can get in. There's lots of fights on the bottom board and all of that. Those are things you're going to see this season if there's a lot of robbing and you have a colony that is robbable. And I mean that, a weaker colony and stronger colonies nearby that are taking advantage of the fact that your colony cannot protect itself. It's a big problem. So Michael, what have you said to folks about stopping robbing when it's occurring?
I've mentioned that you can close off the entrance and sit there and just take a queen mark and dab a bunch of bees. Come back maybe after dark or on a rainy day. And say you mark 100 bees. If you open up your hive and you see only a handful of bees with marks on them, those bees are home for the night, which is not that hive. So you can identify that you're being absolutely robbed. And hopefully somebody will go on the internet and go, hey, I have a bunch of colored bees show up in my hive. Well, yeah, you're the one making a lot of honey. You have robber bees. Huh?
At your expense.
Yeah. I mean, I've been running the backyard beekeepers bee yard for the last 3 years. Come August, all the food gets liquidated out of that hive. We start feeding, but they still have no food.
Yeah.
So somebody's making an awful lot of sugar honey.
Yeah. So I've had to feed out pretty heavy this year also. So the other way you can do is you can actually put robber screens on, and if you were nervous about your colonies getting robbed this time of year, by the way, your colony getting robbed is also a sign of something, right? Like it's probably weak or, can't really defend itself. So there's lots of scenarios that occur when you are the person getting robbed. You can try to stop it during the day. If you saw a lot of activity, a lot of robbing, you could cover your colony with a wet sheet. And what that does is it disguises the entrance. Robber bees do not have the scent of the colony. So they will just fly right into the entrance. So if you take the scent of the colony away from them, they get confused and they can't find the entrance. But the bees that belong in that colony can. They can go underneath that draped sheet, find the entrance and go in. So that's one way to do it.
But those robber bees will start investigating other hives and trying to
that's right.
them down.
It's not that they will stop completely. So if robbing starts in your yard, you're going to be calling us. You're going to be calling.
Bill, do you want me to share a couple of pictures?
Sure.
Just so you can talk to people through what robbing kind of looks like, right? So
sure, yeah, please.
Here's just some examples, and you can talk about the robbing boards, right? How they function.
Yeah, there's a robber screen there that you have your little hand on. So that little device there will only allow bees that belong in that hive to find their way into that hive. The robber bees will try to brute force in from the front, and there's no entrance because the entrance has been changed with that robber screen to the top corners. And that's where they come in. You can see that little tab turned on that top corner, that right there, right on the, it's on the left hand. Yeah, that little tab has, in that position, opens up a little slot, and the bees from that colony use that passageway to get into the colony. And the bees you see under that screen that you're seeing there are hive bees that belong there. The other bees you see, I think they're trying to illustrate on the entrance down at the bottom there with the round holes in it are robber bees trying to get, or that's where they would try to get in. All right, so a robber screen just prevents robber bees from gaining entrance to the colony because they don't have the scent. It also gives the colony a really interesting way to protect itself, right? So bees can't come in mass through the entrance. That's when Michael was saying, if you see a big robbing scenario, you can close the entrance off completely because that's the only way robbers know how to get in. You can see some of these horrific pictures that that Gary has up here of instances where bees are robbing other bees. If you come to the school this year, I'll play a video of something that occurred at the backyard beekeepers, bee yard. Seems like 100 years ago at this point, where I filmed bees robbing a colony there. But yeah, so see, if you look at those bees on the left-hand side, those 3 boxes that Gary has up there, that's what you see. Bees all over the place trying to get in that colony. All right, that's a robbing scenario. All right, enough about that. That's horrible stuff. All right, so what do we got for questions? Oh, small hive beetle infestation from Geo to everybody. Okay, Geo, talk to us about what's going on there. That's what we want to know. Are you still here? There you are. Geo. Right here. You want to talk about that? No?
Yeah, well, I don't have much to add to that. I had a trap in place. Maybe it got dislodged when I put the other super on top, and I can't account for it. It was just horrendously infested.
Like, in what way? Are you
Oh,
larvae?
No, full adult hive everywhere. I saw like as many beetles as bees. They didn't even appear to be, the bees did not appear to be approaching the beetles at all.
Yeah, I think they're overrun by them at this point.
Yes.
So that colony, what did you do with it?
Well, I reinstalled beetle hives, added some of your fabrics from the last yard training,
Yeah.
and I had to stop. Robbing started, and that was it.
Yeah, so that you're gonna have to keep an eye on that colony because that sounds like a candidate. If what you're describing is, a healthy bee colony can survive a lot of small hive beetles, but it's not a good thing.
Yeah, it was kind of weak. It wasn't a strong colony, but it was very active and looked pretty good. I had a recent reinstalled queen.
Yeah. So I would suggest that you take some time to make certain you get this the beetle infestation under control, and then you might want to consider what you do with that colony.
So go back in. You think in a couple of days?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. You got to make sure your traps are working and that you're getting those beetles out of there. Because what'll happen is, under that kind of pressure, the beetles will be allowed to lay eggs, and then some larvae will develop, and then you can just kiss that colony goodbye.
Got it.
All right, so because the bees will abscond from it.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Okay. Yeah, that's terrible. I saw more hive beetle pressure this year than I have in a while. I'm finding colonies with I'm thinking 5-6 beetles as soon as I open the inner covers. That's too many. So I'm seeing it too. What would be the best number of mediums to overwinter with? All right, so if you are trying to compare, so the question that she's asking is, what's the sort of brood nest equivalent if you're using mediums and you were accustomed to deeps? And if you used to overwinter with 2 deeps, how many mediums would you use in that case? The answer is 3. So there's an equivalent, a rough equivalent between 3 mediums that would be cell-wise and available space for your cluster, and 2 deeps. So that's it. And it won't matter if they're not drawn. So they got to be drawn comb. It just doesn't matter. Bees will treat foundation, especially at this point, as just space and ignore it. So you'd have to have 3. Is that what you have, Deborah? Drawn comb?
Yes. Yes, so all drawn comb.
All drawn comb. So you're going to use, so then that's what you would do then. You would use 3 now.
That was you.
What was that? Was there another question?
Yeah, no, that's it. It's all drawn comb, and
Yeah.
I have 4 mediums on there right now. And they're all filled.
With
I've been feeding 2 to 1 past couple of weeks. And I was just wondering whether could I leave the 4th one on there?
sure.
over winter?
Yeah. You can leave that 4th one on there. That's where they'll be in the winter time. In the end of the year, they'll be up on the highest medium we left on there. There's just no rule that says you only have to put 3. You're overwintering in that configuration like you had 2 deeps and a medium,
Right.
right? Because you'll have 4 mediums up there.
And I
Now,
have some insulating sleeves that I made for the 2 deeps. And
Yeah.
they just about will fit over the 4 mediums.
Yeah, they fit on the 4 mediums pretty good. Yeah. And yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, you'll be able to do it that way. Now, is anybody left in a situation where they still have supers on and they're wondering what they should do with them at this point? Does anybody have that situation?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know how to handle that.
I know it's tricky. This is a tricky part of, I have the same problem right now. That's the reason I brought it up, is because I have the same issue. And mine was, out of, not following my normal procedure, which is I just will, long before this, I would have my supers dried and put away. But what happened this year is I put them back on over the top of my inner covers, and they filled with nectar again. So then, and then some of them now have capped honey in them. So now what do you do with them? So I would like to winter. I have some singles I winter with, and in those cases, let's see. So yeah, so I'd be in better shape at this point. I'd have all whatever I'm gonna winter in, and I could feed out pretty easy. So if I was gonna winter in doubles, I'd have just doubles with bees and brood and all over the place, and some honeys on the shoulders and all that stuff. I mean, on the end frames. And then I could just put a top feeder on. I'd feed, and then at the end of October, when I'm done feeding, boom, it's winter time. Put the insulation sleeves on and all that, and mouse guards, and I'm done. But this year I've got this scattering, like some of you may have, with supers on there, and you're wondering what you should do with them. Now, if there is a super on your colony at this point, and it is above a queen excluder, and you intend to leave that on for the wintertime, you've got to take that queen excluder out of the picture. All right. Now, the reason is, as bees progress up through their winter stores, they'll find their way into that super that you've left on. If there's a queen excluder there, the queen won't be able to get up into the cluster, and you'll kill her. All right. So the bees will try to survive, and they have a lot of devotion toward the queen, but they're thinking, if you can't squeeze through this thing, we're going to eat anyway and try to stay alive. So you'll lose your queen that way. You can lose your queen that way. So if you are going to overwinter, you got to take with a medium, you're saying, I'm going to leave that on. You got to take the queen excluder off. Now, when you do that, if you want to winter in that configuration, it's fine, because it's likely if you left the super on this long, if there's lots of honey in the frames below that, and the deeps below that, no problem whatsoever. You can take that deep off and do what you want, that medium off and do what you want with it. You can extract it, as long as you've got 6 or 7 frames of honey on the top deep. in some years, that'll be the case. You'll have a full super and a full top deep. And then you don't have any problems at all. You can do what you want with it, as I said. And in that case, what I would do is I would nadir it underneath the bottom deep. So that's where I'd put it. And I wouldn't take it off the colony. I wouldn't try to store it. I wouldn't try to extract it because there's no reason for me to do that at this point. I'd leave it on the colony, but underneath it. So you get that configuration. So I would take that medium out and put it down below the bottom box. Now, your bees would probably be in the deep above that, but they'd have plenty of winter stores to feed on because they'd have frames of honey up on top. And in the springtime, that box will be clean for you. They will use that honey, relocate it, take it out, and you have to leave it in there for a little while, but eventually that box will be empty. And then you can take it off. And now you've not taken anything from the bees that they need to survive. And you can also, if you do that configuration where you put that super below, you can feed. You can just go ahead and take and put your top feeder on and just put syrup in it, just like you would for any other colony. And then they'll store whatever they need in the top deeps. They won't go down and store it in the super. They'll store it above and on the top. So you can get around that way. So you understand that one technique, what you can do with it. The other thing you can do with it, if you don't need it or don't want that honey, but what I want to caution you about is that you can run into the scenario where that honey in that medium on top of those double deeps is all they had in mind for the winter. And if you look below, you'll find out that the top deep has little or no honey stores in it at all. They're counting on that to be their winter energy source. You can't take that and nadir it at that point unless you're really confident that you can feed out that top box and get 7 frames fed in by the end of October, which I don't think you'd be able to do. So if you find sparse reserves or resources in the top box right below that medium, that means that they're saying that medium is what we were counting on. And that in that case, it's sort of like the rule in beekeeping. You can't take that honey that they need to survive in the winter. You'd have to remove, again, the queen excluder if you have one, and you have to overwinter with that medium on top. Or, you could find frames of honey that you have in the freezer or whatever else. You could do lots of things, but I'm just suggesting that if you don't have a lot of reserve resources laying around in your freezers and you don't have 40 frames of honey you can feed out, you have to go along and do what you can to keep your bees alive and not take their winter honey. All right. So what are some thoughts that people have? What are you going to do with your stuff that you have? Your supers that are hanging in there too long. Oh, somebody mentioned was saying. Any ideas? Did that help anybody?
Yes. My thought was about spinning it out and feeding it back to them.
You can do that.
Okay.
You can absolutely do that, but remember, it's likely honey, but it could be nectar. You'd have you have to thin it to feed it back, Teresa.
What do you mean thin it?
Well, you don't want to, you probably don't want to feed it back as thick honey, although you can. You don't want to. You probably want to thin it.
Thin it. Oh, okay. I thought you said fit it with an F.
Yeah, you have to thin it.
Yeah. Fit it to what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. This brings up my major concern is I don't really think that I have 3 hives. I don't think they're in good shape. I just finished up a Formic Pro treatment, and when I went in there, I really did not find much in the way of stores in either of the deep boxes, and the supers had very little in them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I have next to no new brood.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay,
That part's all right, but you gotta feed.
yes,
Sounds
well, I
like,
did.
yeah,
I
okay.
I did start and, you know,
All right, that's where
I'm
you're
gonna
at.
stay on top of that, so.
Yeah, you gotta stay on top of feeding them until you get a couple of gallons of syrup and maybe even more and see what they do with it. I'm
Yeah,
sure they're gonna
so
eat it.
I have those pro feeders in, they go through that pretty fast, so I was thinking of also adding a medium on top and then doing a jar feeder over the inner cover as well.
Yeah, you can do that. You can put more than one jar in there.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But if
just
you
to-
if you put one over the porta bee escape hole, that's it. It's done. I mean, and you actually kind of if it's using a 1 gallon pickle jar, that cover will that'll cover the porta bee escape hole.
Right,
So
right,
what I put is I put a few pieces of nice little pieces of wedges of wood underneath those jars to lift them up and give the bee the bees a chance as a bee space. And then if you're going to put other jars in there, you can put them in there, but you have to lift the cover up.
right.
You know,
Yeah, I do that by wrapping together a couple of popsicle sticks to raise
Yeah.
them up.
Yeah, more than a couple.
Well, yeah, like 4.
Yeah, you got to get them high enough so bees can get under.
Right, right. So,
Okay.
okay. All right. So I still have a chance of
Oh yeah,
keeping them up. So, okay.
yeah, I would, yeah, no, I wouldn't give up on them yet. Just make sure that you didn't lose your queens, in that Formic Pro treatment.
Yeah, I know I have one queen and I did see some young larvae in a second box, so I think she's there. We didn't see her. And then the other box is a question mark.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure. But I'll go back in.
yeah, go back in. Jane had a great idea about how to get around that drowned in your bees when they're down in those division board feeders inside that cone. She uses a funnel that she got at an auto parts store and has a long end. It goes down right to the bottom of the cone. You can fill the feeders by moving it up. So yeah, so that's another solution to that.
Yeah, okay.
Do it
I
that
will
way.
look for that. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, Jane. If you're using burlap or anything to cover exposed boxes and it helps you to control robbing, you can do that piece of it. And the other thing you can do to control robbing when this time of year, if you're going to use a division board feeder and you have to open up the colony, is you can also use a piece of not so much burlap, but canvas and put that over, cut it so that it fits like an inner cover size and just roll it back and expose just the feeder. And the other bees will stay nice and calm inside the colony and they won't be subjected to being robbed by, you won't start a whole bunch of robbing scenarios. You're not opening up the colony to every bee in it. You're just, and their stores, you're just opening up the part, exposing the part over the top of that division board feeder. All right, so that's another little trick. People made like I've seen that canvas with wood handles on each side of it, and then they would take it around with them and use it on every colony that they were doing something with. Even inspections, it's such a gentle way to do an inspection too. Instead of opening up the entire top of a colony, exposing all the top bars to the world, you can go ahead and do it that way and just expose one frame at a time while you're doing your inspection. So that's another way to handle that. There used to be an old beekeeper down south that he taught me how to do that, and I just thought it was a fantastic way to respect the colony and bees when you're working them. All right, so lots of things to do about bees. That's management style, right? That's not biology. That's management. You're not doing anything wrong there. All right. So Deborah puts on rubber screens. That's great. I mean, that's that wet sheet piece was always good. If you have a swimming pool, maybe you can leave it in there. So let's see. What else do we have? Scott, what do you got?
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
So we talked about feeding them sugar water.
Yes.
So I've also been throwing some pollen patties in there. Is that okay?
Well, I'd be careful with that. I'd be asking like, what are they? When we unfortunately use the term pollen patty as if it were a commodity, but it isn't. There are like 7 or 8 different brands and formulas for pollen patties out there, some that bees just totally ignore. And some they will do something with, but we don't have any evidence that they ever take pollen patties and put them in, store them as bee bread. So if that's what your objective is. And anyway, your bees have collected pollen now for as long as it was necessary to raise bees. They probably have enough stores of bee bread at this point, even a larger colony, that they would never need to go out and forage for pollen at this point before winter bees are in full force and all the brood is gone. We only have a little bit of time left. And most of the time that we have left will not be with open brood. It'll be with sealed brood, and that brood will have emerge over the next 21 days or so, and it will not require that big load of pollen. So you have 2 problems with feeding pollen at this point. 1, it's probably not needed, and 2 is it's a great food for other things in your colony, especially small hive beetles. Small hive beetles will love to have you feed them a pollen patty. They lay their eggs in it, and that's the start of your infestation, your larval infestation, which is the death throes. You're in the death throes of your colony at that point, so you have to be very careful. And so I don't think pollen patties at this point are anything worthwhile doing. But winter patties, now that's different. So a winter patty is probably around 70% sugar. And if you wanted to feed a winter patty this time of year, you could probably do that. And your bees will probably take the sugar out of it and throw the rest away. But while you can, feeding liquid 2 to 1 is way more efficient than feeding a winter patty. A winter patty you would put on later on when it was impossible to actually feed sugar water because it was too cold.
Thank you. When should I do another vapor? I did one in the spring, and I did a treatment a month or 2 ago
Of what?
of Apogard.
Apogard.
Apogard, yes.
Thymol?
I'll be honest with you, it came in this round.
Yeah, it's a thymol treatment.
Yeah, you pull the cover off and you
Yeah,
put it in there for a couple weeks.
Yeah,
and
we did that. Yeah.
and-
Well, I don't know. I mean, if your bees are in a position where they're broodless at this point, then I would suggest an oxalic acid treatment of some kind.
Okay, they actually have more honey stored than they do brood right now.
Well, yeah. Well, I would expect that at this time. That's
Thank you.
yeah, that's about right. The brood should be winding down. As a matter of fact, your queen should stop laying pretty soon. Your colony, I would hope that your colony is totally broodless by the end of November, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. There'll be some brood hanging in there. Remember, we're on a 21-day cycle. I mean, there's not a colony out there that's biologically normal that's actually raising drones at this point. But let me know if you find some colony that's actually raising drones. That would be a really interesting study, but I don't think so. At this point, all we have is brood that's maturing into bees that will eclose or emerge at some point in mid-November. Jamie, what's going on?
Well, I actually have a question, but I have a follow-up question on what you were just talking about. You said the winter patty is 70% sugar. What is the other?
Yeah, there's some pollen in the rest of it.
Oh, okay.
I'm not pollen, but protein.
Okay.
So who knows what they define as protein? They won't tell you.
All right. And my question is, why are brood cappings darker than honey cappings? It's not just the thickness. It looks like there's propolis in it or something. I don't know.
All right. So it's a great question. And the reason that they're darker is because they have silk and wax in them. A brood capping is permeable. It has to
Like-
be able to breathe. Right, so a honey capping is pure wax.
Okay.
So that's the difference. And take one, do you have, well, you might be able to see it with your zoom lens, but if you have a little microscopy or even a loop, you can see that structure. You can also look up on the internet. You'll see how beautiful that laced in silk and wax is, and a little bit of propolis is on a brood capping. It's a very strong thing. Yeah.
Where's the silk coming from?
The cocoon piece.
Okay, so that, okay.
Yeah, so the cocoon comes up and over the cocoon has been woven when the pupa was in its prepupal stage, going into a pupa. And that's why you're seeing that in there, that capping. It's in the capping piece also.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool. I'm going with a deep and a medium for brood. How can I combine hives? Do I need another super to overwinter? I don't understand. I don't understand that question. If you're trying to overwinter in a single deep and a medium are all you need to overwinter. You can actually overwinter in just a deep if it has, enough stores in it. But how do I combine hives? I don't know what you mean by that, Gail. You'll have to just chime in and tell me what you need. Can you feed and do OA treatments at the same time? Yes, you can do that. Thoughts on using sugar? Oh, yeah. No, I don't think sugar boards are appropriate for overwintering ever, because the process of making a sugar board means that you have to take your sucrose solution and heat it up to the softball temperature, which is way up there, 200 and something degrees. Somebody that's a cook out there will know what that is. It's been so long since I made a sugar board that I forgot like what it is, maybe 230 degrees or something like that.
234.
234.
Yep.
At that point, you are also making a molecule called hydroxymethylfurfenol, HMF, and that is a toxic formulation for bees. So I suggest you don't do it, because a sugar board is a lot of work to make. First of all, there's a lot of hot ingredients involved. You don't want to spill it on your dog, from the stove. And then it's much easier just to soak a little bit of sugar and water and make a mush out of it. There's a great formula that I put up on the CBA that was given to me by Dale Hill, the animal nutrition specialist for one of the big firms out west, and he put together a formula for us.
I mean, you can hose them out if you wanted to.
Okay, let's see. So you can follow that recipe, and it's so simple to make, and bees appreciate it just as much as they do a candy board. And then a candy board does something strange with the convection currents that are in a colony. So my management style is to allow a lot of natural convection to occur in an overwintering colony. If I block that by putting on a big piece over the top of the top frames, I stop that natural convection from occurring in a way that I want it to occur. So you can see more about that in that meeting with that podcast with Dave Peck and me discussing that. So I would discourage it, but lots of people do it. Okay, I know. Never rely on internet, but what about bananas as a supplement during the winter drought of feeding? Well, you can eat as many as you want, Gio. I mean, maybe that'll help you, but it ain't gonna do anything for your bees. Yeah, no, I don't know what you mean by that, but I don't. That's interesting. That's cute. I don't know what that is. Okay. If you burn the sugar, you're jeopardizing your bees to possible dysentery during the week. Yeah, well, if you burn your sugar, it's not, you won't burn the sugar in a water solution that you're heating. It'll just go to hardball consistency. You can heat that glucose solution up to big temperatures, and then you just get harder and harder candy out of it. You know, go to hardball and so on and so forth. So, but I guess you can get a Maillard reaction at real high temperatures where you will turn that solution into caramel, or some kind of brown substance will occur in it. At that point, yeah, you are poisoning your bees. There's no, everything that you put in your colony should be white, not brown. If brown sugar, any other thing than sucrose is not a good idea to feed your bees, because it has so many impurities, can have so many impurities in it. And then, yeah, they have to do something with it, and they can get dysentery from it because they won't be able, now that's not a sign of nosema, it's dysentery, because they won't be able to clear their bowels of the particulate that they're ingesting. So that wouldn't be good. And if they get really stressed, they will, you know, they will defecate in the colony, and that'll be a bad deal, especially if they can't get out for a cleansing flight. All right, so Gio has clarified his banana thing. Let me see. I think Gio's going bananas on this on this subject. So he says squash them between the frames. Bad idea, Gio. Now, where are you getting this from? This is the internet now? I'd like to hear this firsthand. Squashing the bananas. Yeah, no.
I watched a similar video of people putting bananas, like just squishing them on top of the frames.
Yeah, bad idea, and don't subscribe to that channel.
Okay, it was a very interesting way to deliver protein and sugars in a way that it was solid, didn't seem to attract the small hive beetle.
Well, first of all, bananas are a substitute for alarm pheromone, or the sting pheromone, right? So
that was mentioned in the video. It didn't seem to attract any adverse reaction from the bees. And the idea of introducing extra potassium and other minerals seemed to be
absolutely unnecessary to do.
Okay.
So I want to make certain that we go away from this with people that are not smashing bananas on their top frames. Right?
So I go back to the banana bread, I guess.
But I like the next comment from Tony. I mean, are they adding cereal to the bananas? So I guess you could give them a good breakfast. Yeah, no, there's no science to support that, and it has got to be one of the strangest feeding methods I've heard. But people do things that are odd. Some people put rhubarb leaves in the top of their colony because rhubarb leaves, of course, have a high concentration of oxalic acid, and they think that's a varroa treatment. They don't work. Who says that bees can actually digest bananas? We don't even know that. I mean, because they take it and remove it, doesn't mean that they've eaten it. Because, you know, the bees won't eat everything you put inside the colony. So they have a little narrow proboscis, and they have to be able to use that, or their mandibles. And then they have an esophagus that runs from their mouth all the way through to a little device that's in their honey stomach called the proventriculus. And it has to be, the granules have to be the exact right size for your bee to digest anything you put in the colony. That's the biggest problem with some of the commercial mixes for protein patties. They're not ground correctly. It's a whole science on how to get that protein piece that you're going to feed your bees into the right absolute formula, so it's no bigger than, say, 200 microns, which is what pollen is, right? So there's lots of things we know about how bees ingest food and so forth. So all of those ingredients have to be right. And there's no known, if you're thinking about the Krebs cycle in human beings and all of our nutritional needs for potassium, sodium, and all that. I mean, bees do have similar needs from that, but it's not from bananas. They can't get it from bananas. Quite a mess to clean up. That's right. Well, listen, what else do we have? I love that. What else do we have? Anything else? All right. So, anything else before we go?
I have a question.
Sure.
So the candy board, how is this different than just putting sugar? Like they keep calling it a candy board and I can't visualize it.
Well, the candy board is the what Anatolia was referring to as as sugar board. So that's a sucrose solution that's heated up to 234 degrees. And then when you pour it out,
making rock candy.
Yeah, well, it makes us what they refer to as softball candy. So yeah, it hardens.
Okay.
All right, so you invert the sugars also at that same point. Heat will invert sugars, meaning that it'll take the sucrose molecule and split it into glucose and fructose, and then it hardens. And so then you can, the old school, they would pour it into inner covers, and then it would harden there, and then they would just flip their inner cover over the top of the frame to the bees, and that would be something that they put them on for the winter. But I wanted to make the point when I was talking about that earlier that actually, if you take the time to prepare your colony now and have for the last couple of weeks by feeding them out, there's no need for any of that kind of action. The bees won't need emergency food if they've got 6 or 7 frames of honey. They just won't need it. And if you insulate that box and put an insulated telescoping cover on it, and you overwinter in that fashion, they won't even use more than 30 pounds of
the honey
the year. Yeah, it just doesn't. There's no need for it, right? And that would only be like 3 frames of honey.
So the 3 methods for winter feeding though are candy board, sugar cake, or fondant. And you said you don't like fondant.
Well, fondant and sugar boards are well, if you buy a commercial fondant, you can do that. That you have to be very careful about what ingredients they've used to make that fondant. The only kind of fondant that you should put in your colony, in my opinion, is fondant that was made enzymatically. So you can make fondant 2 ways. You can heat it and make a fondant candy board. So there's only 1 way to feed your bees as far as I'm concerned, or 2 ways to feed your bees as far as I'm concerned in the wintertime, is you either feed them liquid food now and get them prepped for the winter, and then feed them granulated sugar that's just been moistened. And there's a formula for that on the website, on the CBA website. Look it up under resources, and there's a sugar cake, they call it, way to feed. Everything else is a hardened sugar piece. Fondant, sugar boards, all of those are, and what I explained earlier about the molecule that you make when in that process. If you're heating it, you're making HMF. If you're enzymatically converting sugar into a soft fondant mixture, just make certain that you know what went into that, and that is something that you are not harming your bees doing feeding. So yeah, so there's only, in my opinion, only 2 ways to feed bees: with liquid food or with a cake, a sugar cake.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so yeah, look that up, and the sugar cake is so simple to do. All right, so listen, are we at the end of this here, Paul?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. All right, so I want to just remind everybody again some of the things we said in the first part of this. we have the ag station for the latecomers on October 21st. And of course, that's going to be with Cameron Jack. And if you can all make that, please do. You'll be glad you did. And our B School registration is open and live, ready to go. You can register right now. Oh, we added some items to the CBA store, which I didn't talk about earlier. So we have a store you can buy hats, t-shirts, and we also, I think, added a mug and some other things. So if you want to be a total devotee to CBA, you can go get a mug and make your your morning beverage in that mug and think about bees. So we have some other things going on. And then we have the two final guest speakers. November is Jeff Pettis, and in December is Marla Spivak. And I talked about, again, I want to reiterate all the help I've had during the year in the bee yard, made it really successful. We're going to really try to do some innovative things next year in terms of queen rearing. And also we're thinking about bringing in a youth program. So got some things in the fire that I think will be good for all of us. So with that, unless there's anyone else that has a last, again, if you have time and you want to meander over to the bee yard on, let me make sure I got this date right.
It's the 17th,
17th at what, 10 a.m. or
10
something?
a.m. Yep.
At 10 a.m. And, you just want to join us for like some fun. Come on over. All right. So that's the September 17th at 10 a.m. at the bee yard. All right. Thank you so much. I will see you, and thanks for coming to Bee Talks, and we'll see you soon.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, everybody.